Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Charmed. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I like the whole situation with Macy and Harry, and I love that it's like Mel and Maggie here like bumping. They're like, "What's that?" And immediately my brain was like, "Are they doing the nasty?" And kind of are in the middle of it, and then they're like counting like, "Okay, we'll go through." And like Harry's like, I gotta go," and she's like holding on to him. He's like, "You gotta let me go," and then he warps out, and then she's just sitting there like, "Hey guys," and they walk in and they see Harry's shoes, and they're like, "Oh, this is what we walked into." And so while they're Macy's like, "Oh man," because basically they ended up finding out that like Julian started constructing safe space and started putting up these cameras. Obviously these are magic detecting cameras, so they were trying to warn Macy, because they're we haven't seen Macy or Harry, like maybe they're in trouble, but they were doing the nasty. And so Mel and Maggie are looking at Macy like, "Yo," and she's like, because she's so focused on like, magic cameras then they have to catch Harry up on everything. So it's like, well, what do we do? Because they can't go to the command center, because that would mean going through safe space, which would involve them being in a position where they get exposed. So it's like going in there, it's not going to be an easy thing. So, and they need because they needed to go in there to get the bottle where the Darklighter was sealed, because he's the only one that's got full memory and everything about what the faction is up to. He's our only source of information, so they have to release him. So you have Harry going to get Celeste. So it's basically like, okay, yeah, there's a key that can open it, but it's back at the place where he was sealed, so we'd have to go there. And you also have to find a way to get inside of the command center. So I was like, well, how do we get in the command center? Well, you have to find there were a couple witches that were basically put in with witch protection. So it's kind of like you have to find them, because each one of them was given a marble just in case, hey, you want to pop back in and reclaim your powers as a witch and everything. So, but apparently it's like, how do we find that? It's like, apparently there's like a subreddit of real witches who are just like, we're finning this witch related thing, and so it's just like they've been hiding beneath the surface. So I thought that was interesting, while Harry and Celeste deal with tracking down the key. Now that in itself, obviously, being there makes Harry flashback to like everything that went down, and obviously Celeste is apologetic. It's like, I shouldn't even brought you here. I'm sorry, because all the trauma that you went through, just because separating you from making you into a white lighter and everything, and taking all the darkness in you. But for him, it's like there's no time for that with what's going down. We have to go at this together. So hurry up and kind of get through this so we can unlock the dark lighter. But it also brings up an interesting conversation, because Celeste is like, I know you and Macy are together, and he's like, what? He's like, the fact of the matter is, I would never compromise the Charmers, because obviously like his number one job, and he will look after it. It's not even just his job. He legitimately loves and cares for all of them, so he'd put his life on the line for them, like he's done time and time again, because they're family to him. But Celeste is saying the fact is, being romantically involved with the white lighter, being romantically involved with their charge, can lead to a situation where you end up compromise, and it could put them in danger, especially because it turns out there was a being before known as the Conqueror, who tried to gather up all the magic for themselves, and the original Charm, the first Charm, stood against them, and she thinks Julian might be the second coming of it. We'll kind of get to that later on. Someone kind of amalgamating magic for their own, so you can definitely see that. Truth be told, I've kind of got three suspects, but we'll get to that soon enough on the whole Conqueror situation. But the fact of the matter is, that's going to be the complicated thing. You're like, oh, that sucks. Like, it's like you guys literally once again, it's a mirror image of the whole like Leo and Piper thing. That was always a roller coaster for those two, like having so much. I mean, hell, like they had the elders watching over them and judging them for the relationship. Literally, the elders dead, and that's what makes their relationship even interesting, because there are no forbidden rules, because all the elders are dead, with the exception of Celeste. But it's more of a practicality thing of like, because you're so invested in her, you care about her, you're going to make mistakes, and that's going to compromise the Charmed Ones, because you need the power of three to face what's to come. So Macy, Mel, and Maggie go to the club and everything, and it's like, okay, so how are we going to find a witch amongst all these people? Does that mean we'd have to tell strangers we're a witch? Like, how would we find them? It's like, because they see a familiar face. My mind was immediately like, are they going to run into Jada or something? No, better, they run into Ruby. I was like, huh. And in the grand scheme of things, that makes so much sense. Why? Because it's like Mel's constantly attracted to like witch people. I mean, aside from Nico, there was the Jada situation, then there was the Cat situation, and now there's the Ruby situation. But basically, Ruby kind of explains how she got in witch protection. Like, her dad had died when she was like, I think, was it before she was born, or when she was young, and her mom didn't want this life for her, so she kind of hid them. But she got together with a demon, almost got killed because of it. Didn't know he was a demon, obviously. So obviously Ruby was given a choice of given a marble to be like, okay, you have to decide what you want to do with your life. And obviously she made a choice that she wanted a normal life. Obviously that's something Mel's wanted, but I think out of anyone, Mel has found herself kind of drawn more to like the witch. Like, I think she kind of in the grand scheme of things, I feel like she embraced the witchhood the most. I feel like out of anyone who strived the most for a normal life, tie between Maggie and Macy, I mean, they've all tried, but I feel like Mel's the one that has kind of given herself over to the whole witch thing because she's embraced it. She embraced it the most early on and continues to embrace it the most, And so it leads to a complicated thing of like, obviously Ruby's like, I don't want to get involved. It's like, you don't have to. We'll just take the marble and we do our thing. It is a thing, like, interesting though, like, because later on when she's asking for Ruby's help, it's like, oh, the party's over? Yeah, Charm one's rolling and kind of kills the buzz. And it's like, oh, because I guess it's like, oh, you're the charmed ones. The fact is, where you go, a shit ton of trouble is going to follow. So we're not trying to be around here and stuff like that. Especially probably for Ruby, where it's like, yo, we saw you close to that woman. She's one of the charmed ones. Whoa. So especially a lot of them might be witches who are trying to stay away from that world anyway. It's not just the danger that would follow them, but it's also just like, oh, we're not trying to get mixed up in that world, so this is the end of the road for us. We're bailing out of here. So, but nevertheless, they try to use the marble, but Maggie and Macy get sealed inside. It's interesting because it turns out because it was Ruby's marble, she has to use it for it to work properly. Otherwise, it's kind of like a defense mechanism to make sure because that way it makes sense in the grand scheme of things. Because how can you be so sure someone didn't just try to steal the seed and the marble and try to get inside the command center? So it makes sense in the grand scheme of things. But I like that scene between Maggie and Macy, because obviously Macy's kind of panicking, because for her it's like the thought of like, holy crap, like I wasted so much time, like me and Harry, the whole back and forth like with us, and it's like now that something is happening, I'm scared, like I wasted so much time that like I want to be with him, and I've wasted so much time, and like now potentially might be in a position where I might die. So it's like all that wasted time was for nothing, but Maggie is the one that's super calm, and basically using her ability, she's able to flush her, channel her calmness over Macy. And I was like, that's so interesting. And we've seen, like, obviously she can channel her rage, but it's like all her emotions, she can kind of wave them over somebody, kind of share them with someone. I was like, that's interesting. Like I said, the applications of their abilities and stuff like that. So all while that's happening, we have an interesting discussion, like once it becomes, because obviously Julian's watching the video of Ray, Maggie, and Mel escaping last episode. So he's playing it over and over again. And obviously it's a thing of like, oh yeah, they're dangerous. But for him, it's like, that's what, his Aunt Viv is saying. But for him, it's like, no, Macy can't be like that. I can't even imagine her being like that. And it seems interesting because even Julian, like, I guess he was never there with, I think he got the general concept of what was going on, but he never got the whole blow by blow operation wise, because he's like, but you were the one sending the Dark Lighter after them like an assassin and stuff like that, so even he would never co-sign that was just her way of doing it. So I guess he's like, oh, you got all these magical creatures, and the argument could be it's on him because he never bothered asking why or how she was able to do it. So it's all on him trying to plain ignorance, when it's like you're the one that didn't bother asking questions. But now it puts him in this very compromised position, because now he has to choose between what they're aiming for, because obviously they need to get to the command center so they can get to the Black Amber, because it's a key into doing all that they're doing. Because for them, they're taking all this magic, all they've known about the supernatural world, and they're trying to apply it to modern medicine and make advances of like, we can cure diseases, we can do this. Like, if you like, they're using dead bodies. It's so interesting because it's like, he has to know she's weaponizing them, right? That it isn't just about like, oh, what we, but I guess it's like, once again, it's like, we do whatever we need to do, whatever it takes to kind of make this all happen. So, you know, it's like, obviously it's like the magical world is scary and it can be our enemy. So we need a line of defense. But once again, it's about transferring powers because they haven't found a way to transfer it from supernatural creatures to living humans, only dead humans, obviously. But eventually they're going to make it so that humans could get the abilities without dying and with it being able to kind of settle with them. So it's going to be that angle, but also like, oh, the advancements of what we can do, make cures and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like, you're weaponizing the supernatural world, because that's the sad thing, is they have such a negative view of the supernatural world. Is all of the supernatural world bad? No. Is some of it bad? Sure. Some of the monsters hunt people and kill them, like some are demons, like, yeah, but not every demon is necessarily bad, because you have Abigail being in a very complicated situation. You had Parker, granted he's a former half demon now, but still, and even Abigail's, half demon, but even taking, like witches, but it's just that thing. I mean, that kind of thought process is why Jordan's family's cursed in the first place, so it's kind of a similar thinking. It begets more like hate and stuff like that. So it's just, but obviously Julian, because he still cares for Maggie, because Vivian's trying to be like, oh, like, who's to say she didn't already know about what you really were, which we as the audience know she didn't know. Finding out what you really was, it was a surprise to her. It was a blow, because it's like, because it made her question, like, were you using her the entire time? Her not realizing that you were in front of her, like her enemy, so it's a situation where it's like, you kind of need to sit down and talk so you can get the ins and out of being like, we're not bad. We're actually trying to protect the world. We exist. We're the charmed ones. We're the charmed ones. You know what the charmed ones represent, right? We protect the world, not just the supernatural world. We save humans on a regular basis. So why are we evil? Like, that's just it. But once again, it's like, they're not hunting the charmed ones because they're evil. Even though Vivian kind of spins it like that, she more so is like, we need their power. We need them to kind of be, so we can get access to the Black Amber and everything. So, but she brings up like Rosemary, because initially, obviously, like, Vivian didn't believe Julian when he brought up this whole magic stuff. To be fair, he was a kid, but he spent so much of his life trying to prove like it exists and everything. And so, and it's interesting, his aunt has only just become a part of this world, like between season 1 and season 2, because the moment all the elders died and stuff like that, we can tell in that time in between is when obviously they found the Dark Lighter and everything. So that kind of shows that this is relatively new. Like, obviously he's been trying to prove the supernatural existed the entire time. I think now that his aunt became aware, like, she kind of shifted over to be like, oh, we're gonna like do so much good with this. That's why I'm kind of split on a 3-way on who the conqueror is, because it could easily be his Aunt Viv, but at the same time it could be Julian. But the fact is that Julian is hesitant makes me think, oh, maybe that's not the case. To be fair, who knows? Maybe he starts off hesitant, but then he kind of gives into it and becomes obsessed with what he can do. Once again, you think you're doing good. You think you're the hero of the story, but and you're a monster and villain to other people. You just, it's just like, you do whatever you need to do because you're thinking you're saving the world. You're kind of like, oh, who cares about the supernatural world? We're doing this for humanity. And sadly, you're making the supernatural world have to choose of like, oh, do we draw, like, are we going to be forced to draw the line that we have to look after ourselves, much like the faction is making it so that humans have to look after themselves. So that's the thing. But then the third slot to this is his sister Rosemary. They've been giving her Black Amber, and I'm like, obviously that's bringing her back, but it's like, you don't know what extended use of that's going to do to a human. Like, obviously it was tied to the Charmers getting her powers back, but we don't know what kind of mutation that might cause in a human. She might end up getting her power, like getting powers from it, and she herself becomes a conqueror. Maybe like it becomes kind of like almost like a symbiote thing of like, I gotta consume everything. Maybe that's kind of what she becomes. She becomes a monster herself, so it's going to be, and once again, there's still that loose end of like, who was that? Like I said, someone has suggested maybe that wasn't a white lighter saving 2 witches. Maybe it was a dark lighter. Who knows? I mean, we don't know the other side of that story, what the whole situation was. We've only gotten Julian's perspective on it, and that's sadly for him, that's kind of all that matters. But regardless, when it was all said and done, everyone kind of came together. Like Ruby helped out, and so they were able to get Macy and Maggie out of the marble. And so now everyone's brought together. We got the key. Need to open this up. Harry was supposed to do one thing, stay inside the circle. There'd be consequences. Everyone got blown back. He was so worried about Macy goes over. Because of that, Jimmy almost got away. If it wasn't for Ruby casting a spell, like she's able to do weather, which is interesting when you think about it, because like that's the second weather-related witch that Mel has gotten with. Once again, Jada being part white lighter and everything, so she had the whole, well, her whole thing was electricity, and now Ruby's, I mean, to be fair, that was just a spell. It wasn't actually her powers, because they're still sealed away. She could cast spells, but her actual magic abilities, which I'm curious what they would be, are still sealed away. And we start getting into that complicated area, because it's like, for one, Harry's like, because of what I did, obviously it was my emotions that got the best of me, and because of that, so many people could have lost their lives with that whole, like, it could have been worse. Jimmy was just going to bounce, but if he decided, he could have killed all of them, and that would have been on Harry. And, Macy's like, it's not going to happen again. And, Harry's thinking the same thing. So he turns to Maggie. He's like, you can push your emotions on people, but can you kind of take them away as well? He's like, I want you to try on me. It's like, no, Harry. I was like, dude, come on. Obviously, Maggie's going to be reluctant to do it, but it's just going to be the thing of like, for Harry, he's like, I can't be in love with Macy and do my job of protecting all of you. Because for him, it's like, no matter how I feel about Macy, because he does obviously love Macy, she loves him, but it's like, that's not enough when it comes to like, if it compromises my judgment, when it's like, I need to be looking after all of you, everyone's lives, putting their lives forward, not just how I feel about you, putting you first. The charm ones in general come first before the person I love. So it's a very complicated situation to be in. And then, Mel finds herself in the exact same situation, because Ruby's like, I want a normal life. If we're going to, I like you, I want us to be together and everything. But she's like, I've made my choice. I have no interest in getting mixed up in that witch life. And I want nothing to do with your witch life. I want to be with you. But for Mel, it's like, my witch life is a part of me. I've embraced that. So it's like, and it's not like she can walk away from this. She's a charmed one. The world relies on her. Once again, that's a complicated thing. Once again, the original show focused on too. It's like, eventually it's like, when you do this for years and years, constantly putting your life in danger, putting your life on hold, like so much of your own life, personal life has to suffer. You can't have any form of a life, have a family and all that. Obviously it worked out for the charm ones in the original show, but obviously that road to there was extremely bumpy, so that's a very, interesting element to see where things kind of go on that front. Like, I don't see that relationship kind of working out. It might be a position where like Ruby has no choice but to kind of get her powers back for something later on. Like, I'm sure she's going to hold out as much as possible, but also at the very end to get, his sister Rosemary back, like Julian has decided like, oh, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get this done. So it, setting him up, obviously, like, it's so interesting because like he's now been fully set up. Like, I think beside even just Vivian, I think he's really kind of pushed himself to the forefront to be like the main antagonist. Because once again, they still also have no idea 100% of what to do with the Dark Lighter, because it's like, well, they're going to seal him to get, whatever answers they can from him about everything. Because obviously, once again, there's still a lot left on the board of like, well, because this is only a fraction of the faction, because there's still the whole Nadia thing, and that's a whole complicated thing because there's the whole her and Jimmy thing, which I'm curious, like, now knowing like, well, because we haven't seen her since her and Harry made out, because she thought that was Jimmy, but obviously she handed Jimmy over to the faction. But that's because like Vivian found out that Jimmy had other plans, so I guess that's like, oh, we can't trust you. But if Harry probably revealed himself, that wouldn't happen. Once again, a lot of stuff to keep in mind. If you are unaware, Charmed has been renewed for a third season, which I'm very excited about. It's so interesting because I brought this up before. This being the season finale is kind of weird, considering what the season finale of season 1 was. Like, the story was closed. This ends on such a cliffhanger. I don't know if because it seems like the odd number of episodes is like they intended for there to be 19 episodes, or I wonder, did they orchestrate it like that because of the whole production situation of everything kind of getting shut down, or was it always meant to be 19? That's what I was kind of looking into a little bit. I didn't really find find an answer, but to be fair, I did a little research. Regardless, I'm very excited to see kind of, what this means set up for season 3. Once again, like I brought up, is like who this Conqueror is, and what, once again, my 3 suspects, Vivian, Julian, or his sister Rosemary, what, and even if she's not the Conqueror, what that means with that Black Amber. I feel like that's going to turn into something eventually. There's also the whole angle of Jordan's situation hasn't been resolved, so let's not forget that's still an open storyline about what he's got to do, the prophecy that was kind of foretold to him and everything. You know what I just thought about? We do have because there was that whole thing, you're 3 of light and you're 3 of dark. That was a whole conversation before. Well, we have the charmed ones, and then we also have Julian's family. We have his aunt, him, and his sister. They could be like a trio of darkness. That could be a route. That technically could be where we go, because it could just be like she gets resurrected and they kind of have their path of like, oh, we represent humanity versus the charmed ones who represent the supernatural world, even though they kind of represent all sides to the situation. But so that's potentially, an angle to all that. Obviously, I think a new season will probably get to explore the new abilities more, because we only got a little bit with Macy's, and obviously Maggie's literally just kicked in last episode, like another level to her ability. So spending more time with that, potentially, what they are fully capable of. And then once again, there's the whole Abigail storyline. What is that going to turn into? Obviously, she's on her own and stuff like that. While humans are kind of rising up, obviously the demon world is in an uproar after everything that went down in that regard. So, obviously they've got like a complicated, reluctant ally in Abigail, because she's going to be looking out for her own survival. But it's like with the faction coming, it's like we literally entire supernatural world might have to come together. But it's like, well, any potential working relationship with the demon world, that's completely gone now. So I don't see that potentially happening, Then, like I brought up earlier, there's a whole Harry thing. If he does get rid of his feelings for Macy, that's the sad thing of it's a lesson that, if you've watched anything related to the Vampire Diaries, the originals or the legacies, that could be a slippery slope, because you never know how far that could go. You could go to basically turning off your emotions, basically kind of becoming a little bit like Macy was at the end of season 1, in which she became the Source. You can almost, that's a complicated thing. It's kind of like she got what she wanted, and she was willing to cast aside anything else that kind of went against that. But who knows, maybe what Maggie does, she kind of goes too far and ends up taking more than just his love, and Harry becomes a little hollow of I have my job, and that's all. He becomes, his humanity almost gets kind of turned off. That's another element too. Like I said, my brain is on fire about different thoughts. What about Harry and Jimmy? Will they ever become one again? And if they do, what would that look like? Is that a possibility? Because it's still a thing of, if they're separated, if one of them dies, the other will too. So that's a whole lane that has to be considered as well. And obviously, since I brought that up, that's still an element that didn't pop up this season at all, which, once again, you always got to remember, this could potentially be a story element that can be used in the future. It's the whole Source thing. It's not dead. It's just broken up in 3 pieces scattered across the world. So even though they didn't touch that storyline at all this season, that doesn't mean that can't be something they end up bringing up next season or a season after that. That's always going to be something that's actively at play. Hell, maybe that might even flow into the Conqueror storyline. Like I said, it potentially sets itself up. It's like I said, it's still something out there in the world that we never know, a demon or just any human could stumble across that. Hell, with the Black Amber in Rosemary, who knows, maybe that storyline ends up tying together. Maybe I'm putting strings together, things that don't necessarily have to even go together. Like I said, this is just me potentially ballparking what potentially could be. We have no clear-cut ideas. There's thoughts about it could go this direction, but at this point, we don't know, And that's exciting to be okay, so what direction are they going to take next season? I'm assuming that obviously they're still going to be in Seattle and stuff like that. Because part of me was wondering, is this season going to end with them? Because obviously, like I said, nothing was resolved at the end of this season. That's why I'm still wondering about the whole episode thing. But regardless, taking the finale as it is, at face value, just being okay, maybe this was what they intended. Then nothing is resolved. All of this is going to be probably dealt with heavily at the beginning of the next season. So that's kind of an interesting thing to kind of, keep in mind. So, like I said, ultimately, we'll have to wait and see what they have in store for us for season 3. I am very excited to find out. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.